even though nuclear weapons were tragically used against Japan during World War II. Since then, countries have come together to prevent the use of nuclear weapons and promote the use of nuclear power. What are nuclear weapons? Broadly defined, a nuclear weapon is an explosive device that converts matter into energy. There are two types of nuclear weapons: atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs. Every part of nuclear weapons are dangerous, from transporting them to building them. Countries around the world have fought to keep the nuclear weapons because of how destructive they are. Nuclear weapons are a sign of power amongst the different countries. Nuclear arms race started soon after World War II, with the United States and Soviet Union the two most powerful countries with the biggest arsenal of nuclear weapons. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was the closest the United States and Soviet Union came into nuclear war. The president of the USSR, Nikita Khrushchev, had reached an agreement with the Cuban leader, Fidel Castro, to build nuclear missiles on the island of Cuba. The U.S. ships blocked the Soviet Union ships from bringing weapons to Cuba. Immediately, the U.S. agreed to avoid invading Cuba if the Soviets removed the missiles from Cuba. The standoff was resolved peacefully and resulted in the Test Ban Treaty. There were many treaties over the years trying to limit the production and testing of nuclear weapons. The Test Ban Treaty was signed in 1963 to prevent countries from testing nuclear weapons. In 1967, there was a ban on the introduction of nuclear and nuclear weapons of mass destruction, and the Non-Proliferation Treaty was put into effect in 1970 to limit the spread of nuclear material for military purposes. 190 countries are part of this treaty and meets every 5 years to review the treaty and check on the countries that are involved in it. Countries with nuclear weapons will not move towards disarmament. Countries without nuclear weapons will not acquire them. And all countries can access peaceful nuclear technology. The SALT Treaty, Strategic Arms Limitation Talks Treaty, was signed in May 1972. It was between the U.S. and the Soviet Union to limit the use of anti-ballistic missiles in each of the countries' collection of weapons. The Treaty on the Limitation of Underground Nuclear Weapons Tests was signed in 1974 to limit the testing of nuclear weapons underground to 150 kilotons, equal to 150,000 tons or less. This treaty was significant because the U.S. and the Soviet Union agreed upon sharing information on the data collected for these particular types of tests and explosions produced. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty was agreed on July 1991 but did not go into effect until December 1994. START reduced strategic weapons by 30% and significant reduction in warhead and nuclear delivery vehicles. In September of 1993, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty was signed to prevent nuclear weapon testing and prevent nations with nuclear weapons from developing more advanced weapons. Many of the nuclear treaties originated from countries breaking a treaty or a fear of a country with nuclear weapons becoming too powerful with the weapons they already own. With each new treaty signed, there have been nations included in the signings and some nations not signing. North Korea has been a country that has continued to be a threat to nuclear safety. The purpose of the treaties was to protect their countries from being destroyed by nuclear weapons, but also to protect the average person from nuclear radiation exposure and the effects it has on everyday life exposed to it. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant, located in the Ukraine, had an accident on April 26, 1986. It was the most serious accident in the history of the nuclear industry. There was an explosion that set in motion fires for 10 days. As the fires burned, large amounts of radioactive material were released into the air and surrounding soils. People that were directly and indirectly exposed to radioactive material were affected. The human toll was devastating. People who were exposed to radiation had a higher rate of cancer, infertility issues, and birth defects. It was also true that animals and plants in the surrounding area were abnormalities amongst animals and plants after the explosion. The general area was deserted for years due to fear of radiation exposure. The nuclear industry has developed and changed with each treaty signed and has affected countries around the world. There are still countries like Iran and Pakistan that have refused to stop nuclear activities, but there are hundreds of countries that have signed the various treaties in order to keep peace. Countries have promoted the use of nuclear power instead of producing nuclear weapons. After the tragedy of at Chernobyl, countries have shared information and data to better operate their nuclear plants. Countries throughout the world may never be in total agreement in regards to use of nuclear technology, but with these treaties in place, the constant examination of past agreements, the United Nations have tried to protect the world from misuse of such a powerful energy.